Hello, my name is Terry Dixon, and on behalf of the Twisp Grange, I'd like to welcome you to the Candidates Forum this evening. And thank you all for coming. And I really want to thank the candidates for not only coming, but for running. And maybe we could give them all a big hand. This forum, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the two main people who made this happen. Val Hecker, who is also our timekeeper, and Wendy Branden, who's back there fiddling with the sound system. Our moderator tonight is John Roth. And before we begin, we're going to stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I'm going to hand the microphone to John.
I too want to echo Terry's thanks to the candidates and also to all of you for coming this evening to participate in the forum. Before I give a few audience instructions to explain how this forum will proceed, I want to recognize several of the candidates who are running unopposed. I think there's 7 of them altogether, and I'm told that at least 5 of them are with us tonight. So when I call your names, if you would stand or wave so that we could recognize you, that would be terrific. So first, Larry Gilman, running for assessor, unopposed. Charlene Grooms for clerk. Charles Short for district court judge, position number 1. There he is in the back. Robert Grimm, district court judge, position number 2. And I'm told that Leah McCormick, running for treasurer, is also here. So thanks to all of you. Now, I'm going to read a short statement that explains how the forum is organized so that you in the audience will know what to expect, and it will refresh the memories of the candidates who are speaking. So we are using the League of Women Voters format for this forum. Please hold all applause until the debate is finished. There are many here who favor one person, and if we applaud each as they speak, we will have less time for questions to be answered. So no applause until at the end of the evening, please. Candidates will have 3 minutes for their opening statement, and then 2 minutes to answer your written questions. A timekeeper will keep track of the time, raising a yellow flag when 30 seconds remain, and a red flag at the end of the allotted time. Each candidate also has the opportunity for one 1-minute rebuttal. The method to initiate a rebuttal is to raise the ping pong paddle. Okay? I don't know if this will happen or not, but we wanted to allow a little bit of time, just a little bit of time, in case someone feels that they need to rebut. So the ping pong paddle is the signal. One change from our usual format is that we will allow questions to be directed to a single candidate. The other candidate can respond to the same question if it seems appropriate for the other person to do so. If not, I, as the moderator, will move on to another question. And we'll try to do as many questions as we can, even though our time frame is compact and constricted a bit. Our page, Ilo Curtis, will be passing out index cards for your written questions. Please have your questions ready to turn in by the time the opening statements in a forum segment are finished. Raise your card to have it collected by the page. Our timekeeper tonight is Val Hecker. The question screeners are Wendy Branden and Steve Dixon. And my question to you is whether you have any questions about the format. If not, the candidates will give their opening statements in the order that they appear on the ballot. I think they're aware of that. And the candidates will introduce themselves. So we start with the candidates for the position of auditor. And Ms. Hall, I think you'll be up first.
Good evening. My name is Carrie Hall, and I would like to be your next county auditor. I want to take this opportunity to thank you all for coming and to thank the Twisp Grange for putting on the forum. I'd like to start with just a little bit about what the auditor does, because not everybody knows everything that the auditor does. There's multiple different job duties, and the skills and knowledge in one job duty doesn't necessarily transfer to the other. So we of course do elections, we do voters registration, we also do recording, which is when you buy a house, the documents, the title companies, they bring that to us, we record it. We also issue marriage licenses, and of course there's the finance aspect. I have 20 years this month of finance management and accounting experience. I started off in the governmental sector for 4 years. Then I went to the nonprofit Gap world, where I was the chief financial officer for 13 years. And then three years ago this month, I started at the county auditor's office as the finance manager. In that role, I assist the Board of County Commissioners with budgets. I oversee all of the finance and accounting in the office, which includes $90 million of accounts payable and payroll. I'm also certified in vehicle licensing, which takes about a year to get. I have worked in recording. I have issued marriage licenses, and if people have heard me before, that's my favorite part of the job in recording. I have also worked in voters registration. I was learning the election side, and then when I decided to run, I of course have stepped back, and that's the part that I'm really looking forward to learning more on. I believe that with my experience and my knowledge, that it makes me uniquely qualified for the role. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. So my name is Randy Gates. Thank you, Carrie, for mentioning all the duties of the auditor, so I won't go back into that again for you. I was born and raised in Okanogan County, spent just a brief period of time away from the county, enough to know that I love this county and wanted to come back here and raise my family. I've been married 20 years to my beautiful wife, Leah. We have 3 wonderful daughters and 4 grandchildren, all living in this county. My family heritage is deep and strong throughout the county. My father is Rudy Gates and Bonnie Townsend Gates. My dad grew up in the Cheesaw area with a logging mill on Pontiac Ridge. My mom on Johnson Creek on the way to Concanelli. So I feel family first is what brings to me who I am. I love my family. We have a strong, really deep group of people. We spend a lot of holidays and stuff together. Next is my community. I'm a resident. I live here with you. I want to work for you. I want to make the auditor our auditor's office. I want you to feel very friendly and feel like it's a place where you can come and do your business and you're greeted like your neighborhood favorite little coffee shop. You're going to come in, you're going to be greeted with a smile. We're going to be very helpful. I'm going to bring the office hours to 8 to 5. I notice here in the Twisp area that's a long travel to the Okanogan County Courthouse. So I'm going to expand those hours, an hour and a half each day. That gives us almost 7.5 hours a week to have you come do your business with the auditor's office. So I'm going to really focus on customer service. I'm also a patriot. I love our government. I love Okanogan County. I love everything about the United States and what people have fought to bring to us and give us. And then lastly, I am a Republican. So that's kind of how I look at things. I'm a family man, I'm a resident, I'm a patriot, and then last would be a Republican. I have done a lot of volunteer work. I've spent time with a lot of youth in the soccer community. I've done high school soccer refereeing, a lot of volunteer work, 15 years worth. A lot of those kids now come to me and they have their own families, and their families starting into the recreational program, and they have nothing but great things to say, and it's just so proud to know that I was raised in this community and I've spent time with people here, and that we are such a tight-knit group. One of the things that people love the most about this community is how helpful we are to each other. And so, in short, because I love this county, I have an opportunity to give back to you and work for you and help you bring the auditor's office back to you and give you some great customer service. And by the way, thanks for everybody coming out. What a great group. It looks like we have a good turnout, and this will be a great night. Thank you.
The question screeners didn't hand me any questions for the two candidates for the auditor's position, but I'm going to ask them a question that you'll hear more than once tonight, because we agreed that in the closing statements that the candidates make, they might all address a question which I think will be interesting for us to learn about. And the question, and Randy, I'll put this to you first, and then Carrie can answer. What is one important thing you have learned during the campaign for the position that you're running for?
A lot about myself. Oh my goodness. If you've never ran for, I've been on a River Valley Soccer Club board where you're elected there too, but that's just a bunch of people trying to do good things in free time. You go out and you meet a lot of great people. Some of the questions are just incredible. Here at the Twisp area, I was over by the farmer's market, and everybody that came up to me and they said, "Oh, you're a Republican?" I said, "Okay, yes, I am." Do you support Trump? Well, yes, I support Trump. I supported Obama. I supported Clinton. I'm a patriot. I support our country. Do I agree with some of the things they said? No, not at all. I don't agree with some of the things that Trump does and says, and I don't agree with some of the things that Obama and Clinton does and says. So the biggest thing I've learned about it is myself, that there's a lot more strength. I worked at the radio station for years, and so speaking in front of people was great. And I always think back at the movie The Quick and the Dead, where Gene Hackman is like, oh, he finally gets to go against that gunman, the preacher gunman. He's like, oh my goodness, I haven't felt this in such a long time. Oh, it's just a great feeling. And being a public speaker, every time I come to the forum and I'm in front of these folks, it's like I get that feeling, and it's like, oh wow, I kind of like this. I don't get this feeling much anymore. So I really appreciate the people, and it's just been nothing but a great experience. If you ever get the chance to do something like this, step out on your own, step out away from yourself and try it. Doing community service and working for the public, there's nothing better you can do. Thank you.
So for me, I would agree with Randy in that I've learned a lot about myself, but also one of the most eye-opening experiences has been on the other side of the fence, so to speak, because I've worked on the election side, so the processing and all that. It's so much more personal when you're running yourself. I've learned a lot about myself. I grew up here, but I've learned a lot about the community, and I've met a lot of people who I didn't know before, and I thought since I grew up here, I pretty much knew everybody. No, I have got to meet a lot of people, got to understand more about our community, and I agree with Randy that if you ever have the opportunity to run, it's a great way to give back to your community, but it also helps you to understand yourself a little bit more. Thank you.
Let's thank our candidates for the position of auditor. Now we move to the sheriff's position, and Mr. Hawley, you'll be up first for your opening statement, and then Mr. Brown, you'll follow.
Well, good evening, and just as you were already greeted, thank you all for coming here. It's been a very long summer of doing this campaign trail. This is my first time doing this. I am by no means a politician. I've been a career law enforcement officer. I enjoy going out and meeting people face to face. Normally it's in small groups. These large groups I'm not as well versed at talking with. But with that, I've learned a lot about myself in doing this. Shortly about me is I grew up in Okanogan. I joined the Marine Corps after high school. I served in the Marine Corps for 4 years and achieved the rank of corporal. I returned back home because I didn't want to stay there. I wanted to raise my family back home in Okanogan County. When I returned back, I started working in the jail. I worked there for about 2 years. And while working in there, I was able to see that the guys that worked out on the street were having a lot more fun doing their job than I was going to jail every day. I figured out I didn't do anything wrong to be in there every day, so I decided to apply, and I got hired out to work as a patrol deputy. Starting in the city of Okanogan, then moved out to Mid-Valley, became specialized in traffic enforcement, and about 7 years ago was promoted to patrol sergeant. As a patrol sergeant, I've been in charge of our field training operations, our special response team. I manage several grants, both state and federal, that get us funding and also extra patrols, funding for equipment that we otherwise wouldn't have, and extra patrols that put boots out on the street so that people are getting to see more law enforcement officers patrolling our county in specialized areas or specialized functions. And so with that, it's just a little bit about myself. What my vision is for the sheriff's office is I want to continue having well-rounded sheriff's deputies. I'm not looking to have everybody that's specialized in doing certain functions. We have a very large community. It's never as big as you think it is until you start driving your own vehicle around here and going to each corner of this county to try to talk to people. I've worked this county for 23 years driving around in a patrol car. It didn't seem near as big until I started doing the driving on my off time. There's a long distance between places. And what I want is our deputies to be able to get out and get to those areas. As a sheriff, I want to continue to go out and be outside the office. There's obviously a lot of administrative work that needs to be done. We have a small department. We have 30 commissioned deputies. We have a jail that has to be run. We have a dispatch center that needs to be run that provides services to all of the emergency response in the county, the medics, the fire, and law enforcement services, not just the sheriff's office. The sheriff's job is huge. It's much bigger than you can realize as a line deputy, and it's just been opening my eyes to see just as big and just what the responsibility is for the sheriff of this county to take care of all the needs of this community. I appreciate you guys all coming out. I thank you and appreciate all the support that I've had.
Good evening, thank you. I want to thank the Twisp Grange and John for moderating. And as we've traveled up and down the county, I think I can speak for everybody, or at least for me, I'll speak for me. This is the largest audience that I've seen, and more new faces than I've seen at any one of the forums that we've attended. So I appreciate your turning out to hear the candidates tonight. This is the 5th or 6th one I've been to, and I swear, the first 5 I went to, I saw everybody at the same one except for 2 different people. So I really appreciate that, and thank you. Like John said, my name is Steve Brown. I was born and raised in Okanogan County and graduated from Okanogan High School. I spent a little bit of time in California working in the oil fields. As soon as I graduated, I realized that California was not the place for me. So I returned to Okanogan. I went to college. My lifelong dream was to be one of 2 things, either a logger like my dad or a professional baseball player. So I chose professional baseball, and that didn't work out. I went to college for 1 year, and I was playing college baseball when I got a call one night from my coach who said, "Your dad's in the hospital, he's been hurt in a logging accident, and we don't know whether he's going to survive or not." So I quit college that day. I returned home, and I spent the next 7 years here in the Medhow Valley working for the Forest Service. It took my dad quite a long time to recover, so I'm thankful for that. Not that he got hurt, but I'm thankful for the opportunity that I had to work for the Forest Service, because to this day, I think, besides the drug task force experience I had, it was probably the most fun I've ever had. I worked with a group of 18 men and 2 women, and all we did for the 7 years that I was here was travel from Arizona to California to Oregon and Idaho and Washington fighting wildfires. And I wish I wasn't old and gray now, because I'd still like to do that. After those 7 years, I returned to college and I ended up getting degrees in Parks and Recreations and Wildlife. I ended up getting a third degree in criminal justice, and I decided to apply everywhere in the state of Washington that I could, to include Idaho State Patrol. I really like the outdoors, so what I wanted to do was be a game warden, and I realized that that wasn't going to happen. Back in those days, John Danielson was the only game warden in this county, and I realized that I wasn't going to replace him. He wasn't going to retire. He wasn't going to die anytime soon, so I just needed to get my foot in the door. So I applied everywhere. The tribe hired me in 1999 and sent me to the Criminal Justice Training Commission. When I graduated from there, I spent 2 years of patrol there. I was assigned to the Drug Task Force in 2001, and I've spent my entire career either as a detective, a supervisor, or the commander there. 3.5 years ago, I was assigned to, or I was appointed Chief Criminal Deputy to the Okanogan County Sheriff's Office. My training includes first-level supervision, mid-level management, executive leadership, and a graduate from Command College. Thank you.
All right, we have some questions that you've prepared, so I'll pose the first one, and Steve asked if you'll be the first respondent. Tony, you can respond if you wish, or if not, or I will move to another question, your choice. So, Steve, the question to you, it would be, why are you the best candidate for sheriff?
I believe my leadership and my experience in my law enforcement days make me the best candidate. I've worked patrol. I've worked criminal investigations. I've been a first-level supervisor. I've been a mid-level management supervisor. I'm a commander. I've been through all the courses that CJTC requires in order for me to make that transition. I'm a graduate from Command College. I've been through executive leadership, and I believe that I have the best vision. I know our philosophies are similar. I just have a different direction that I want to take the sheriff's office. Although I'm part of the current administration, we don't always agree. The sheriff and I disagree on several things. One of those things is the PROACT team. Currently, the structure for the sheriff's office is a lot of those decisions are left up to the sergeants. So there would be a vote by the sergeants whether or not we have a certain group or individual or somebody doing a job within the sheriff's office. One of those was our property crimes unit. That property crimes unit was disbanded in 2017 by a vote of the sergeants. I just disagree with the sheriff on that. And so I think that the direction for the county and the sheriff's department needs to have that property crimes unit. I believe that the sheriff should bolster the drug task force. I believe that the sheriff's office should be involved in youth programs in Okanogan County at the school level. A lot of us do coaching. A lot of us, Tony's on the school board. I coach Little League. A lot of us are involved with the schools, but I think we need to have a bigger impact within the school system throughout the entire county. And so my training, my experience, my leadership, and my direction for the sheriff's office, I believe, makes me the best candidate.
Tony, do you wish to reply to that question also?
Okay, for myself, as I stated before, I have almost 24 years experience as a first level or first line responder. I respond out to whatever call comes across the board. I've investigated everything from a barking dog to a homicide. I have a vast toolbox of whatever call that you've come up with. I've been to it. I've been involved in investigating it. I've been involved in seeing it through to the end. Everything I've been assigned to do, I go, I guess, kind of over the top. I got assigned to the traffic unit, and at the time the sheriff was okay with just going out and stopping cars and doing some collision investigation. I chose to go and become a collision reconstructionist, which is the highest collision investigator available in the county, or in the state, and I'm the first one to do that for Okanogan County Sheriff's Office. So that's the way I go about things. I started with the Sheriff's Office. When I got out of high school, there was no way I was gonna ever go to college. I went and I earned my AA degree, my bachelor's degree in organizational leadership, and my master's degree in strategic leadership. With those experiences, and also with being on the school board, I've reached outside of law enforcement to learn how to drag in all the stakeholders and make those decisions, not just on myself, but taking everybody into account, what their needs are. I get asked a lot about search and rescue. I know very little about search and rescue besides don't go get lost. That's what we do when I go hunting. I go where I know and I keep a GPS so I don't get lost. So it's near and dear to this area. My idea on that is to bring in the experts on that, talk with them, find out what's the best way we can go about those things, not just make unilateral decisions, but utilize the experiences and the ideas of the community, the people that are involved in this, the people that it's near and dear to their hearts, and also the law enforcement and what we can do to take care of those things. And I want to approach everything that way. Just as Steve said, I'm on the school board. I think that we do need to bolster our drug task force. My question has been, when Steve was removed came out 3 years ago, nobody went back in that spot. Why did that happen? I want to look into some of those questions and find out what we need to improve our agency.
Tony, you might want to just stand up and keep the mic, because I'll put the next question to you. And Steve, you can respond if you wish. This is kind of a tough one. As sheriff, how would you handle being directed from a higher authority to do something that was illegal or immoral?
Okay, well, I don't see that as being tough at all. Throughout my career, I've been faced with things that, we have a small community. As Carrie alluded to here, we know a lot of these people. I go to houses and you get things, and I've gone to my friend's house, and it's like, okay, please tell me you didn't hit each other so I don't have to do this, because I don't want this to be here. So, but there's things that we have to do. We have to follow the law. We have to follow our morals. We have to do those things. I don't care who it is. I've been told by a supervisor before that I need to do a certain thing. I wasn't comfortable with that, so I continued my investigation until I was comfortable with the investigation, and in the end, making the arrest that I was directed to do would have been wrong because the person wasn't responsible. So I've done that with a direct supervisor that I have to work with all the time, a past supervisor, not a current one, so just to be clear. Yeah, it is tough to do that, but you do need to stand up to people, and we need to stand up for both our community and for what we believe in, and make sure we take care of those things. But I don't think that's a hard choice at all. If it's illegal or immoral, it's not going to be done. So it's pretty simple for me to go along those ways. And if it is somebody that thinks that they are in charge, we can explain to them why it's not going to happen that way.
I don't really know why I stood up, because I don't think there's much more to add. None of us in law enforcement that I know want to do anything that's illegal, regardless of who tells us that. I'm sure our morals differ somewhat. I mean, we're in law enforcement, we're not the same people. We're all different. We're all human beings. We have different morals. But as far as the legal question and the legal aspect of it, I don't care what higher authority tells me to do what. If it's illegal, too bad. You want me to stand for the next one?
Yeah, you might as well stay there, because here's another one. What do you believe is the best strategy to reduce the number of Native and Hispanic youth in the county's criminal justice system? And why would you think that?
I missed them. Did you say meetings?
Yeah. What do you believe is the best strategy to reduce the number of Native and Hispanic youth in the county's criminal justice system?
Wow, I didn't know that we had an increase. I mean, I don't know who asked the question, but it sounds like we have some increase in Native or Hispanics in our criminal justice system versus some other race. And I don't see that to be the case. And so that's a tough one to answer. I can answer it for everybody. I'm not going to be specific to a certain race. I just don't see it that way.
Tony, you want to take a crack at that?
Sure. So I agree with Steve. I don't see it as being we need to focus on their race as far as dealing with our youth. We need to focus on our youth and positive impacts and getting into our schools. One of the things that early on I said I want to get a school resource deputy program going. I understand that costs money, and that's not a 2019 goal. That is a future goal to get things going. We have to start someplace. We have to have a big, huge goal in order to make small steps. even if we're just getting involved and going to the schools and being involved with them at a minor level, but we need to be involved and get positive impacts. Right now with law enforcement, we go to somebody's house, it's been a bad day for them. Whatever's going on, we're going there for a negative thing. So we need to find ways for our law enforcement, our sheriff's office, and our law enforcement across the county to make positive impacts and positive contacts with our kids so that they'll know that they can come up and talk with us. They know that this is a better route to go, so they're not being drug into the criminal aspect of what's going on in the community, and they're more apt to come talk with the positive role models, and they'll seek out some positive things for themselves. But as Steve said, I don't see that as just being, secluded down to whatever the person's race is. I think we need to do that with all of our youth.
I think we're getting near the closing of this segment. So, Steve, I'd invite you, if you would, to reflect for a minute or so on something important that you've learned during the campaign. And then, Tony, if you'd answer that too, to wrap us up here.
I think the biggest thing that I learned was really nothing about myself, because I know who I am, and I know I'm not going to change. I'm 46 years old, and when you get this old or even older, right, you already know who you are, and you know you can't change. But I think it's been, and I'm probably speaking for everybody, it is extremely difficult to do this and stand up here and take the questions for us. I think it's more difficult for your friends and your family. I really do. I think it's really hard. It's hard to listen to your friends say, did you see what so-and-so posted on Facebook? Did you see what so-and-so wrote? I didn't. I don't really care. But it has a big impact on your family, your mom, your dad, people talking about your mom and your dad that don't even know your mom and dad, people talking about your friends, the hate mail back and forth and the text messages. And I never dreamed, because I don't live in that world. I never had Facebook before I started running. And I'll never have it again after this. And so, you 500 people that friended me, I'm sorry, but I'm gone. And so, I just think that what I've learned is, boy, this is a tough game. It's a really tough game for everybody out there. And I know I've taken up my time, but I want to tell everybody out there that's a family member or a friend who's supporting Tony, Carrie, anybody else that's sitting up here or those who are about to come up here. I feel your pain and your struggle, and I understand it's a difficult thing, and I'm sorry for anybody that had to deal with any of that stuff. Thanks.
I agree with everything he just said on that, so I'll move on to something else. Really appreciate that, those comments, because yes, it is really hard for everybody's family that's involved in dealing with this, and I'm like Steve, there's lots of times people brought up stuff to, did you see this? No. Because I was told that early on, run your campaign, don't let somebody else run it for you. So I avoided looking at a whole lot of that stuff intentionally, not to ignore them, but just because I wanted to present myself out to what this community, what I want to offer. The biggest thing that I learned through this process is the intelligence of this community and this county, the questions, the care, how much they're involved, and how much they really care about our sheriff's office and law enforcement in general. Again, 24 years in this business, I'm not normally the nice or the most liked person, most sought after person when you show up at a scene. Sometimes we have to be pretty straightforward, and not everybody likes you, and it doesn't come across that you're very well liked when you're in law enforcement. But just to see the care that goes on in this community about what our sheriff's office is and what our law enforcement provides and how much they really care about what goes on with our sheriff's office has meant a lot to me. No matter how this plays out, I know I'm going to stay with the sheriff's office, and it really means a lot knowing we have the community support behind us to continue doing what we do. Thank you very much for coming out.
Let's thank our candidates for the sheriff's office. Now, you in the audience can have a little stretch break here while we change the people who are on the stage. So take advantage of a little break time here. Okay, break time is over, please. Time to take your seats, and we want to keep pretty close to our schedule if we can, so please take your seats and come to order. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, are we ready to go? I want to respect the speaking of our candidates, so we need to have quiet and take your seats if you're planning to sit, please. Okay, in this segment, we will be hearing from candidates who are running for the state representative position 1 and position 2. And so we'll be starting with opening statements from Keith Goehner and Ann Diamond.
Good evening. Glad you're here tonight. So the reason I'm running for the House of Representatives is because I've had a career as a county commissioner, and I've seen the effects of legislation on the counties, who are really the purveyors of a lot of the services that you all enjoy and you're expecting to receive from the county. But before I was a county commissioner, I was an orchardist, and we still have orchard. And my wife and I, who's here tonight, Lisa, have lived in the Dryden area pretty much all our lives. I took a little time out of college to teach school, and then realized that I really did like being outside. I liked the farming aspect. I liked the independence and being self-employed, and so we ended up being pear growers. And that's been a great opportunity for us to not only enjoy the industry, but to raise our 3 kids, and we have 6 grandkids, and they're part of that same lifestyle. So when you think about what you want to do in life, the main thing that you're concerned about is being able to enjoy what you have, that being whether it's your private property, whether it's the business that you run, whether it's the employer you work for. I mean, it's all about community, and it's all about having strong and stable communities. And as a county commissioner, when I chose to run, I realized that at that time, it was time for me to get involved if I did not see the values and the interests that I had being protected by those who were running. And so, I threw my hat in the ring for that, and 16 years later, I've seen a lot of things happen that I've been able to positively affect. I've been advocating for the people of Chelan County for that whole time. And it's given me a broad exposure to different elements of government. The expectations that I mentioned are there. People want their roads plowed. We've got to find a way to pay for keeping that infrastructure, the roads paved, and keeping them a strong infrastructure transportation-wise, because it's critical for all of us. We've had issues with mental health. We've had issues, with the law enforcement aspect. I mean, there are things that I've had the opportunity to deal with at a state level that makes me realize how important it is to have a voice of experience being part of that mix. When you look at the makeup of the House of Representatives, it's often dominated by the urban mindset. And it's really critical that we have rural people who have lived the life and understand how important it is to have a strong ag economy, make sure that the tourism in this area is addressed, and most importantly too, the natural resources need to be taken care of. And I'm referring specifically to forest health and just the environmental elements that need to be strong in this district. Thank you.
I'm on a short leash, so I'll stay here. Ann Diamond, and I know many of you. I've been a physician in this community for 16 years. Before that, I was commuting down to Brewster, and as I would drive down through the Twisp region and on down through the Methow, At one point I realized it made sense for me to turn back and be a community member here where more healthcare was needed. One of the aspects of being a family doc is you get to know your community in the post office, in the grocery store. Jerry won't even go into the grocery store with me because he knows I'm going to be there for 20 minutes doing a curbside consult. And part of being a physician is just stopping and listening. I didn't know when I started on this journey that that is the role of your legislator too. A legislator is your advocate at the state level for what's important to you. And so you need to have someone who will sit down, listen to what you have to say, and then pull together with your region to best move forward. And I am also running independent. When I first started running independent, it was because I was tired of the parties. I felt that the parties were spending way too much time bickering with each other. And I have to say recently, as I've been knocking on doors, I'm getting that feedback back in spades. So instead of people asking, well, what does independent mean? I'm hearing, I'm independent too. And Gallup polls state that. They say 44% of Americans believe they're independent, and yet you don't see that reflected in our legislature. Two of the things that set me apart from every person on this stage and every person in the state legislature: I'm a physician and I'm running independent, because neither currently exist in our state house. I'm going to take a moment and just talk about something that has been important to all of us in Eastern Washington. And 4 out of the 5 last years, we have endured catastrophic fires. And it's interesting to note that we all recognize that carbon is a pollutant. How many of you enjoyed wearing a respiratory mask this past summer? Actually, how many of you did wear a respiratory mask at some point this last summer? So half the audience raises their hand. What that means is that in terms of carbon, right now it's trees and trucks that are causing most of the carbon emissions in Eastern Washington. And on that point I have to end because I'm out of time. Thank you.
Okay, we've got some good questions. Ann, you might as well keep the mic for a minute.
Trees and trucks.
This is one I think that probably every candidate will need to respond to. And the question is, what would you do specifically to assure that all residents of your district and the state of Washington will have affordable health care in the near future?
I can't overpromise. I'm going to be going to the state, and at the state level, there are a number of things I can do. One is I can work on medication prices. At this time, Medicare patients pay 10 times more than Veterans Administration patients if the veterans have to pay at all. Many of the veterans' meds are free. What that means is there is a block. Medicare has not been able to negotiate in bulk for cheaper prices. The state does for other programs. Washington and Oregon have a consortium. They buy meds together and they pass those discounts on to patients who have Medicaid but not Medicare. In addition, other states have tried re-importing meds across the border. We live next to the Canadian border, and many of you, I know, go to Canada for your meds. And I've mentioned before that a local pharmacist has gone to Mexico for her asthma meds, and it's cheaper for her to go to Mexico and buy her meds there than it is to get them through her insurance. Medication prices. Mental health is going to be critical this next session. Part of the reason is we have 2 state hospitals, Eastern and Western, and coming in 2020, they are no longer going to admit civil assignments, which means those that are most gravely disabled out of our community will not be able to go there. Instead, it's going to be people from the jails, the forensic admissions. The region is going to have to be responsible for those mental health patients. And yesterday I toured the 2 mental health units that are down in Wenatchee, and they see what's coming, and they are struggling to try to figure out how they will have more beds. Mental health and lower drug prices are the 2 main issues I'd like to work on.
Keith, I know the audience would like you to respond to this question too. What specifically would you have in mind to ensure that people in the district and the state have affordable health care in the near future?
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is distinguish between health care and health insurance. And oftentimes, I think there's a little bit of a confusion when people talk about how expensive their health insurance is. That is a little bit different than what the health care offerings are. Now, Dr. Diamond has addressed the medication aspect. There are opportunities for negotiating, better prices, and that would lower the costs. From a health insurance standpoint, I think that it's important for the state of Washington to allow more competition between the health insuring providers. And that's, what we find right now is that there are less and less opportunities for people to even pursue health insurance options. So, if you look at the healthcare side, in talking with hospital administrators and physicians, there have been a lot of regulations that have come down that have created more costs for the hospitals. And in my experience is probably more reflective of Confluence and also Cascade Medical, that there are things that have added to the cost of providing health care. And so, from the state level, I'm not sure, what can actually be done as far as addressing that, but I do think that there needs to be some very significant conversations and realization that sometimes regulations have added to the cost, that we need to be able to reduce some of that, allow a little more flexibility with the providers so that they have an option of reducing costs and not being forced to provide costs and testing and things that are not really cost effective for them.
So just stay right there, because here's another one coming at you that's not easy. Member from the audience wants to know, do you believe that climate change is due to human activity?
Climate change is something that is very real. I mean, it's been going on from the beginning of time. And the human activity element, when you talk about CO2 levels and you reflect back, we've had higher CO2 levels with cooler temperatures. I know people have said, well, the science is done. Well, in reality, science is something that continues to search out what are the changes that are occurring. But when you dig down through the snow in Greenland and you find evidence of trees being there, or we talk about the ice age that came through here, obviously climate has changed. And that was happening without a lot of man's intervention. So, whether we are influencing weather patterns, that's a different story. But I think that what's really important for us is to recognize that we have been given this earth to be stewards of, and we should be doing things that have gives for a good, healthy environment. And those are things where we have to make good choices. It's pretty obvious some of the things that have happened through the course of time have not been good. But when you look at what's happened in manufacturing and industrial operations, the way things have been reduced with scrubbers, and we don't emit what we did emit. Even the catalytic converter was a very positive move forward. So I think that it's important that science is constantly working to make things better and recognize that we do have pollutants that we need to address, and hopefully that will have a positive impact.
Anne, please, I think the audience would like to hear from you on this too.
Well, I do agree with Keith that we need to be stewards of this earth. I am a scientist, and I know that there is no question that we are contributing to changes in our climate when we emit carbon into the atmosphere. And as I alluded to before, in eastern Washington right now, trees, when they are in part of a catastrophic fire, and trucks, as they try to get the goods that are grown in eastern Washington to market, are the two competing factors that are most contributing to climate change in eastern Washington. When it comes to the trees, how do we improve forest health? And I'm a healthcare provider. Health always is less expensive if you take care of it at the beginning. Prevention. How do we prevent fires? And people have commented along our journey that we have a very proactive Commissioner of Public Lands, Hillary France, and she's been championing the Good Neighbor policy, which allows for the state to partner with the forest, the U.S. Forest Service, who is in charge of most of the forests in eastern Washington, nearly 3 million acres that need help. And Hillary France is endorsing me. When it comes to transportation, the issue with transportation is how do we increase technology so that we can have electric cars, electric semis, electric tractors that will use the very low-cost electricity that we have from clean hydropower. And if you want to take it a step further, production ag now is exempted from carbon emission requirements, and that's in recognition of the fact that we need to preserve our agricultural community. Thank you.
Okay, we each will take 1 minute from the two candidates for this state representative position to hear their reflections on something significant that they've learned from the campaign. Keith, maybe you'd go first on that.
Well, one of the things I learned about District 12 is it's a big district. There's a lot of ground to cover. And yet, as I traveled throughout the district, whether it was to Grand Coulee, or of course we live down in Dryden and we're at the other end of the district, you know, the people are the same. They're great people. They enjoy living in this district. And what they need are, you know, they need to be able to stay here and be able to afford, you know, the homes that they own, the land that they work. And it's important for us as legislators to make sure that that happens. It's a challenge, I know, in each session because there are so many competing interests, but the people of the 12th district are great people, and you know, it is my commitment as a representative to look out for your interests and ensure that you can stay in the land that you own, and that we can enjoy this great district and work together to make it a better one. Thank you.
I agree with Keith. It's an enormous district, and fortunately, I am at home tonight, so I wish you a safe journey home. One of the things that people said to me when I first started is they commented on courage, and I didn't necessarily see it that way, but what they were referring to is they just felt that things were so partisan and ugly, and that all people were just going to try to throw mud and dig things up about me. And instead, what I found is that people are kind. And when you knock on the door, they want to come out on the porch and tell you what's important to them. And oftentimes, you never get nearly as much done as you hoped because you're spending so much time on one block. In addition, when I talked to, today was the mayor of Chelan and one of the port commissioners, these are public servants. And I am so impressed with the people who represent you already in your community. I would never have known that if I hadn't stepped out and stepped up to do this. But you should be somewhat reassured that people do care in your civil government and are doing their best and do have your best interest at heart. Thank you.
Thank you both. Now we'll move to the state representative candidates for position 2, and Mike Steele would be first up with his opening statement here.
Well, good evening. Thank you so much for being here this evening, and thanks to the Grange for putting it on. It's a pleasure to be at a forum like this where so many folks are out here trying to educate themselves about the candidates that are standing before you. It has been an honor and a privilege to serve as your state representative over the last 2 years. And you know, it's a place that I've loved, a place that I grew up in. For those of you who don't know me, I grew up just down the street in Chelan, graduated from Manson, attended Pacific Lutheran University where I have degrees in business administration and political science. I spent a little time on the East Coast working in the political affairs office of the White House many, many years ago, and then came back to work at the State House before coming back home 13 years ago to serve as the executive director of the Lake Chelan Chamber of Commerce. My family has been in the Valley in Chelan for 115 years, and it's a place we deeply, deeply love, and this region is incredible. And I'll tell you, as someone who served in the State House, that's evident, because when you go to the State House and you tell people where you're from and you tell them who you represent, they immediately want to help you. They immediately want to work with you because they know what kind of place this is. And they know that we send good people to the legislature, and they know that the people they send to the legislature care about their home. Currently, I serve on the K-12 Education Committee, the Capital Budget Committee, and the Technology and Economic Development Committee. And through those committees, we've done a lot of great policy work to address things like the town hall here in Twisp. We're working with the council to find ways to pay for new facilities. We've done great things around the Methow Valley headwaters, continuing to work on that. I've had the opportunity to work very closely with the Methow Valley Land Trust and open up legislation there so that they can ensure better opportunities for that project. Capital projects throughout the district, and worked very, very hard to put an unprecedented amount of funding through the capital budget around mental health and behavioral health. One of my biggest passions, and one of the things I hear a lot about in the legislature around the state and around my district, is how do we address workforce housing? So as someone who serves on the capital budget, workforce housing has a real opportunity to expand what it is we focus on in the capital budget through either the Public Works Trust Fund or CURB, giving more money to that operation. Increasing funding to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund as well at the state level has been a priority, because I recognize that as someone who grew up here and was fortunate enough to come back here, that isn't always the opportunity granted to every person that leaves. So there's a lot of great policy work left to be done, and again, I've appreciated the trust you've placed in me to do that policy work. I just also want to reiterate as I start that it has been an incredible experience serving with members from both sides of the aisle in the legislature, and for the most part, good folks who are there to make a difference in the communities that they live in. So again, thank you for the honor.
Hi, I'm Valerie Sarratt, and I live between Twisp and Carlton, so I'm local here. In a recent letter to the editor, I was characterized as a socialist. That was intended as slander. I suppose that I earned that label by supporting universal health care, excellent public education, and welcoming immigrants instead of placing them in cages. Or perhaps it was my advocacy for affordable housing and living wages for workers and standing up for environmental issues. Well, if that was what was meant, I want to go on record as embracing those things and that label. I would be honored to join the ranks of Bertrand Russell, Albert Einstein, Mahatma Gandhi, and yes, Senator Bernie Sanders, all prominent social democrats. In that same letter, I was also criticized for not having a business background, which is true. I've been a public schools teacher for over 17 years, spending most of that time helping underprivileged kids improve their lives. I made that choice decades ago when I went to graduate school at the University of Alaska and started my career teaching Native Alaskan kids. But it doesn't take a PhD in economics to see the direction of our truly horrible economic policies of the GOP. Trade policies which are ruinous for our local farmers and ranchers, cutting off the supply of farm laborers, using draconian immigration policies, punitive tariffs disrupting international markets, and worst of all, a massive transfer of wealth from working class families to the already wealthy, done under the false pretense of a tax cut. According to the latest report of the CBO, this would drive the deficit to $3.1 trillion. Those are dollars that all of us and our children will have to pay back with our taxes. Dollars which, if laid end to end, would reach from the earth to the sun and back twice. Almost all that money went to help Wall Street, not Main Street. The Republicans have proven that they are the worst ever stewards of the economy. Their approach is nothing short of a kleptocracy. Our opponents have disavowed knowledge of these things, saying they are strictly focused on local issues. Well, fellas, undermining our local economy is a local issue, as are lack of health care, low wages, unaffordable housing, and all the rest. I close by asking you to stand with me in support of all the Democratic candidates on the ballot this fall, as we bring back the voice of the people to our democracy. We must vote out those who have so often violated our common interests. In the words of John Lewis, if not us, then who? If not now, then when?
Valerie, keep the microphone for a minute because there was a question that came in specifically for you that relates to your statement. And the question is, what would be your budget priorities for the state of Washington?
One of the main budget priorities, I think, may have to be healthcare, and looking at some of the ways that we can start dealing with the gutting of the Affordable Care Act that is happening and may be happening soon. Mitch McConnell just talked about, and I know this is at a federal level, but Mitch McConnell just talked about looking at Medicaid and Medicare. And so if that happens, if they start cutting in those areas, the Democrats who hold the House and will certainly hold the House in the coming term are going to have to start looking at something that is state-based, perhaps a state-based universal health care. Now that's a big project because it's going to actually also have to take the federal Congress to change also. But they're putting in bills, they're starting to look at ways that this can happen to protect the residents of Washington State from the ravages that are happening right now at the federal level. So that would be definitely one. Education still, we've got some wonderful funding that was passed in the capital budget of the last term. And so I look towards funding early education. I think that's incredibly important. As a teacher, I see that getting the kids when they're really young and working on developing rich vocabulary and giving the reading skills that are necessary, we have to focus on that because it's so hard to develop their skills at a later date. So money needs to go into early education. There are a number of others, but my time is up for that.
Mike, there's a question that would allow you to comment on budget priorities too, but this is written rather specifically to you. It says, given that you did not vote for the capital budget, can you explain why?
I did vote for the capital budget.
Okay. So, well,
we actually passed it first to the House. And I was on, and I want to make it very clear, it's very interesting because the capital budget, this is a great example of where misinformation occurs. We are a great group of 19 individuals who work very collaboratively together. It's a bipartisan committee that really looks at our role in the state legislature as, okay, we have to protect this capital budget from the rest of the legislature. We've worked really hard collaboratively to build it. And by the time that capital budget hits the floor, we really hope we've guaranteed the votes. So as folks know, there was a big snafu this last session with the capital budget. And what happened is we voted it off the House floor, and it went to the Senate, and the Senate held it. Had nothing to do with the House. So I just want to make sure that folks know that. It was very confusing, I know, as folks were reporting on it. But I'm a fairly high-ranking Republican now on that capital budget. And you can tell that I've been respected because the Speaker of the House, who is not my party, appointed me and 7 other legislators out of 198 to create a new approach to school construction, because we know that the school construction approach we've been using is antiquated and it doesn't address all of the needs that school districts have in rural communities and urban communities alike. And how do we try to create equity in a system that isn't adequately addressing that? So I think that's an important element to understand. I actually fly out tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. To be in Olympia for that special task force because it's important that we get it right. We've been holding capital budget meetings over the last several months in this interim, and we are due to report back to the legislature our progress in December. And all of us, the 8 of us that serve, 4 members from the House Republican Caucus and 4 members from the Senate Republican Caucus, 2 and 2, so 2 from the Republicans, 2 from the Democrats in each chamber, serve on this committee. And it's important that we get it right and have a responsible approach to school construction in the future.
Keep the mic for a minute. Again, the question on health care, which seems to be on people's minds, what would you do specifically to ensure that people in your district and in the state of Washington have access to affordable health care?
It's a great question. And I think I really appreciate the optimism. I think when you send someone to Olympia, it's important that they are your advocate. But one of the very complicated things you've heard from all of us up here, and anyone who is pragmatic like myself when it comes to policy, is you recognize the influence that the federal government has on driving the costs of healthcare in the state of Washington. And we are not alone. I mean, there are other states that are dealing with these very issues. One of the things that complicates it for Washington state is we were an early adopter of the Affordable Care Act, and that created a network of services and systems that we implemented because we were told to in the state. And so now if we go back and try to adjust anything at the state level, we rely on that early network from the Affordable Care Act as our checks and balance. So does it work? Will it work? Is it allowable by the federal government? And as you know, the conversation at the federal government gives all of us as legislators pause, because we don't want to be reactive, we're trying to be proactive, but until we have a system agreed upon at the federal level, it's very, very hard to create state policy that's going to address the things we're seeing across the board. And so it's this very sort of intricate dance that says, well, guess what the federal government can do. And if any of you can guess what the federal government can do, you probably should be up here on this stage running for a higher office, because we just never know from day to day what they're going to do. I've worked really closely with our delegation, the federal delegation, to say, this is a real issue. And I think, again, as an advocate for you, you can say that. You go to your congressional delegation, you say, this is an issue. What are you doing to help us? Can you give us some insight into what you're doing to help us? So that maybe as a state legislator, I can come back and say, well, I know what they're thinking about. Maybe we can go down this policy road. And again, all of these committees in the state are made up of bipartisan legislators. And this question has been posed for years. So it's a really, really something that we have to work collaboratively on. It's going to take the physicians, the patients, Congress, insurance companies, all of us sitting down at the table to frankly reevaluate how we offer healthcare in total in the country.
Valerie, would you like to pick up on this? You commented earlier about health issues, but perhaps something more specific has come to mind now.
Sure, yeah. Well, I agree with Ann that we have to also look at the pharmaceutical prices that are there. But it is, as Mike says, it's something that we have to get a lot of the players to come together. As a lot of we candidates say, this is what our job is to get everyone to sitting down and really hashing out what we can do. So I don't really have a whole lot more to say about healthcare. It's something that is very complex, and being a middle school / high school teacher, I haven't really delved into the super deep specifics of that. So that would be something that would be really challenging, but I really want to take it on because it's, as you go around, I've been around door knocking too, and we hear it, the healthcare is tremendously important to people. And what's frightening, of course, is that wages have stayed, pretty much the same for mostly middle and low income people. And so to have some sort of hospital bill or doctors' fees that are large and surprising will take us under economically as a family or as an individual. So we have to really address this because Well, I do have a lot to say about this, actually. We're 37th in the world on healthcare, not access, but healthcare providing. And 37th is crazy when we have such a rich economy. We need to be up higher with that. So we have a lot of work to do.
Mike, as we come down to the last minute here, could you share with us something that you've learned from this campaign that seems particularly significant?
Sure. Well, I think folks know I served on city council for 6 years in Chelan before being elected to this office, and I liked those campaigns a lot better. I was always unopposed. But this is my second time running for the House of Representatives, and each time you're out campaigning, it's an opportunity for folks to engage, because in an election year, people are coming out. They're trying to meet you. They're trying to understand where you stand, and they're trying to get a sense of how you're going to effectively make change for them and protect their quality of life in Olympia. So I'm always rewarded by the fact that folks are taking time to sit down with me in a year that they don't have to. You don't all have to be out here in Twisp, but you've taken the time to do it, to educate yourselves, and it gives me reaffirmation that our communities care, that they want to be engaged, that they want to be informed, and that they're trying to make the best decision for the community as a whole when they're sending us to serve them in Olympia. So thank you very much.
Valerie, yours is the last word on this segment. What have you learned from the campaign that strikes you as really significant?
Yeah, I've learned that we need to start civics education really early in our schools. It's amazing what people, kids don't know. I mean, I talk to my students about the whole process, and it's just, we got to get that in there somehow. I know we have basic education that needs to get taken care of, English and math, but we need to get kids excited about serving, entering public service and doing this kind of thing. I also have reflected on how it's really important to be frank about your ideas and about your core values. And I notice, not necessarily in these races here, but in general, people are kind of, candidates are unwilling to really go there in certain areas. And so they kind of use language that's very vague. And I think it's much more important to be straightforward with the voters. So thank you very much for coming out tonight.
Let's thank our candidates for the House of Representatives. And you in the audience can stretch your legs for just a minute or two while we change the scene up on the stage. Okay. For the commissioners, We're getting some questions, yeah. No, I read it earlier today, but the community, yeah, something like that. I don't know it though. That's pretty good. Yeah, we'll be okay. Yeah, no, we'll get them going. Okay, Wendy Branden says that we need to come to order and reconvene. So, if you're ready, please take your seats and let's come to order. Okay, a couple of things. I've been told that some of you in the back of the room may have some difficulty hearing me when I'm posing the question, so I'll try to lean into the microphone a little closer and hope that that's helpful. I'm also told by the question screeners to let you know that we're getting lots of good questions, and we have more questions than we have time. So we'll try to cover as many as we can, but we probably won't be able to cover every single one of your good questions. But we thank you for them, and we'll do the best we can to cover as many as possible. This next segment focuses on the Office of County Commissioner, and we'll begin with the opening statement from Jim DeTro.
Thank you, John. Gosh, it's good to see so many people out. I'm amazed. We haven't had a crowd like this since the public hearing on marijuana. But anyway, my name's Jim DeTro, and I'm the incumbent District 3 County Commissioner. I would like to thank my wife, as I always do. She's my greatest supporter, and we had a death in the family this week, so it was a bit of a stretch for her to be here, but she got some good moral support from her friends that came with her, Patty and Carol and Alicia. Thank you. I was born in 1948 during the flood in Omak, Washington. I went to 8 years of school in Riverside, grade school, and then on to 4 years of school in Omak High School. A little bit of a culture shock. There were 6 kids in my 8th grade graduating class, and 4 years later, there were 106 in my 12th grade graduating class. From there, I went on to 2 years at Wenatchee Valley College and 2 years at Eastern. People have referred to firefighting this evening. That has been a big part of my entire life. I started out at 16 years old as a crew truck driver for a firefighting team with the DNR. A couple of years later, I came here to the Met House as a smoke jumper. I was here before the highway was here in 1972. I was here on the jump base before fire shelters came into existence. In fact, we did initial testing over here at ENCSB on fire shelters, the original ones. I was here before red cards or blue cards. But when they came about, I participated after I went to the private sector from the Forest Service, and I had a red card up until 2 years ago, maybe it's the third year this year, when I got too old and fat to run. So I've enjoyed working with the Wildland Fire Advisory Committee for the answers to the Commissioner of Public Lands in the state of Washington, Hillary France, and that's been a very good experience, and it's a very good committee. So that gives you a little bit of background. I've been a pilot for 46 years. I had a trucking company for 45 years, and I had a heavy machinery sales business for that same amount of time. So I've run out of time. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Salley Bull. I'm running as your independent candidate for Okanogan County Commissioner, District 3. District 3 is the North County. It goes from about Omak Airport north to the border and stretches from Concanelli to Wakanda. My family homesteaded in the Chilliwack Valley. That was 4 generations ago. And they were also the first minister for the Ellisford Brethren Church, and started the Loomis and Whitestone churches too. All 3 churches are still active. I grew up in Orville and raised my kids in Tonasket, living in Loomis and North Pine Creek too. I've been a community advocate just like my relatives. My relatives were doctors, nurses, preachers, teachers, council members on the board for the school, the hospital, and irrigation districts. So I'm stepping into their footsteps, their shoes, and I'm president of the Orville Library and Community Board, and we just finished a 100-year remodel of the building, increasing the footprint of the library itself 150%, adding a civic room, and this place is terrific. It was a project that had been fundraised for 30 years, and people fought over the plans, and when I came on board, we got things decided. We took the wants, the needs, and did the had-tos, and we met the ADA standards to make it a terrific public building. It's the pride of Orville. I'm also on the Orville Scholarship Foundation, and when I first joined that, they had their endowment investments at 0.5%. It was terrible, and I was able to convince them to get advice and to do better investment strategies, and now we get 4% with the endowments protected. So we're paying out nearly $20,000 each year to these students, and that's a big deal for a small town. I'm on the Okanogan County Planning Commission, and we've been working on the 2014 comprehensive plan, and that came under legal review because of the water situation. And I'm on the Board of Equalization. I had a small business doing hand-felted hats, and that was very successful for 10 years. I did arts and crafts shows showing those hats from San Francisco north to Anchorage. Thank you.
Okay, Salley, just hold on to that microphone for a minute.
Oh dear.
And a question that came in for both of you is this: please describe your attitude toward historic public roads and access to public lands.
Okay, so historic roads, they've been there. They're on the maps. They're on the 1955 map. Roads are an asset to the property that they're next to, the property that they go through. In order to abandon them, you have certain RCWs that you have to follow, and they involve It has to be a benefit to the public to close it, a proven benefit. It has to have sign-off from people that are along that road, which includes what's on the end of the road. If that's the Forest Service has to sign off. And the third thing it has to do, it has to compensate the county for the road and the studies. So I don't think we followed any of those things for any of the roads that have been closed. I think we need to be very careful when we are closing a road.
Jim, would you like to comment on your attitude toward historic public roads and access to public lands?
There's a process. It's called vacation. Everybody's aware of that. But what a lot of people aren't aware of is that the CRAB board, which is the County Road Administration Board of the state of Washington, requires us to do road log studies, and it goes back to the map of 55. That's when all county wagon roads, trails, and access was mapped out. So we need to go through that and purge it every once in a while, and that's according to law. And the reason for that is because the CRAB board is the board that sets how much money comes back to the county for the road mile log, or the logged road mileage that they have in the county. So sometimes this gets contentious. People are fond of their roads, but we have to follow the law. And a lot of these road vacations involve things, and I'll just give you an example. We were going through some roads that were being logged by an engineer before 1955, and up here in the Manhow there was a particular road, and they described the road in a particular corner on that road by 350 feet paces from where the barrel was shot. Now, how is that going to stand up in a court of law on a legal premise nowadays? So through the years, you have to work on the road log, and sometimes when we build a new road, we add mileage. When we have a road that is no longer useful to the county and somebody applies to vacate it, then it's done through a petition process and goes to a public hearing. As far as historic roads, we're doing right now a primitive road study because we have a lot of primitive roads in the county because they're only maintained once a year. And I ran out of time.
Now, a question about roads almost unavoidably leads to a question about ATVs. So, Jim, could you give us your description of your attitude toward all-terrain vehicles? But there's a twist in the question on this one, because it comes from a friend of yours, I think in Winthrop, who wants to know why you chose to drive an ATV into Winthrop, knowingly in violation of Winthrop town laws prohibiting ATVs.
This is going to be more fun than I thought it was. Okay, day before Memorial Day 3 years ago, 22 of us did what we called a peaceful protest and rode 11 side-by-sides into Winthrop, where the ordinance was not posted anywhere. We spent $450 between the bunch of us at Three Finger Jacks in an hour and a half. And it wasn't a bunch of rabble-rousing young kids. It was the average age of the 22 people that rode over there was 62, all senior citizens. We had veterans, we had disabled veterans, and you people are lucky that you had a very tolerant marshal in Winthrop at that time, because he chose to talk to us and tell us what was going on. We exchanged what we were talking about and what our attitude was, and had he written a ticket to us that day, we would have had the city of Winthrop on discrimination. Because anything else in the world can come through Winthrop except for a WATV or ATV or ORV. You can have a fairy festival, you can have a gay rights parade, but you can't ride a WATV with disabled veterans and veterans into that town, that is out and out discrimination. And that's why we did that. And that was what our cause was for going there that weekend.
Salley, do you want to comment on your position regarding ATVs in Okanogan County?
If there's an ordinance that they're not supposed to be in town, then they should be respected. The ATV riders want to have respect on the roads. They need to give respect to the other people. Some towns allow them, and they're celebrated, like in Concanelli. That's main transportation there. And some places do not want to have them there. And I think you need to do some respect there, okay? They don't want it there. I don't think it's discrimination. I think it's a vehicle law.
Okay, let's switch to hospitals for a while. And Salley, maybe you'd go first on this. The question here is, what would your disposition or outlook be on funding for hospitals in our county?
What would be my...
Yeah, here's what the question says. Please describe the recent change in policy by our county treasurer in regards to financial support for hospitals. Do you agree? Why or why not? What is the importance of hospitals in our county? Perhaps it's that last part of the question that's the critical one.
I think so. I think they may be talking about the treasurer making comments that she does not want any of the hospital districts to go into registered warrants. And she's trying to keep them in the black. We have 3 public hospital districts, 3 different hospitals, and each one of them has been in registered warrants at one time or another. And they're all running in the black now, and that's great. They've made some changes to where the Brewster Hospital and the Tonasket Hospital are sharing the CEO. Not really to save that much on money, but because the guy wants to stay here. So you've got stability in leadership and in the management of the hospitals, and that's real important rather than trying to find somebody who doesn't want to really come to this remote area. The hospitals, excuse me, the hospitals have a hard time making ends meet. The Medicaid reimbursement has dropped a bit. There's a couple bills that are in Congress. One sat on the Senate floor for 2 years now, and it has to do with 105% Medicaid reimbursement for rural hospitals. It's to make it better for them to survive. And that's a real positive thing if that can get pushed through.
Jim, do you want to comment at all on the importance of
Sure.
hospitals in our county?
First of all, I'd like to say that we as a county are very fortunate to have a treasurer that we have that has the leadership ability and accountability to stand up to the hospitals and tell them that I'm not your scapegoat and I'm not your bank. And that's what the problem happened, and that's what refers to registered warrants. When they'd get in trouble, they'd run to the county and borrow money from the county on registered warrants. And it got to be such a problem that the hospitals were not being fiscally responsible and taking care of business like they should have been taking care of business. So they were always in debt, and they used the registered warrants as the vehicle to always bail them out of the fix they got in. So we worked very hard. We had lots of meetings. Treasurer, auditor, commissioners, hospital districts, working out these problems and giving them fair warning over a 4 or 5 year period that, look, you guys, you gotta get your act together, and if you have to go to a bank, go to a bank. But the county registered warrant situation is the very, very last entity that should be used in that chain. So as Salley referred to, hospitals have a tough time. The emergency room door, that is the biggest financial drain on any hospital, because once you walk through there, you get treatment regardless of whether you can pay, you can't pay, and unfortunately, some people use the emergency room door rather than having a family doctor. And it puts a tremendous financial burden on the hospitals because they walk in there and then they don't pay.
We're nearing the end of our time on this segment, so Jim, maybe you'd go first here. Is there something that you've learned during this campaign that strikes you as particularly important?
Well, as a county commissioner, we have from 260 to 280 employees. We have 65 junior taxing districts. We have 3 hospital districts. We have 20 fire districts. Need I go on? That all falls under the purview and the fiscal responsibility of the county commissioners. So what have I learned? I learned something brand new every single day. Not just something new during my campaign. There's so much that comes at you and is unfunded mandates from the state, or whether it's just financial problems within the county, as I referred to with the hospitals. So every single day, you learn something new in this position.
Salley?
What I've learned? Okay, so I've been hitting all sorts of city council meetings, chambers, senior citizens, and what I see are big needs around the county. Some of them are different, but a lot of it are the same. Healthcare is a big issue. Housing is another one. Affordable housing for families to stay and work here. Jobs, unemployment is really high in this county. These are issues that are shared by Brewster, Pateras, Orville. Orville's terrible, 30% poverty there. The schools have 80%, they're getting free and reduced lunches. And we need to pull together. We need to look to see what we can do. We need to have better education and training programs for the unemployed. And we have programs already in the county. The apprentice programs, the L&I programs are there, and so we need to push that, and the schools are doing more training programs there, and so this is big issues.
Thank you. Now we move to the segment featuring the candidates for prosecuting attorney, and we begin with Arian Noma.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank the Twisp Grange for putting this event on, and thank you all for coming. I'm sure if you've been listening to the campaign trail, you're all aware now, if you didn't know already, that we have 2.2 million prisoners now nationwide. That started to grow from 1972 until present. 1972, we had 350,000 prisoners. It's a 700% increase. If you look at it on a chart, it goes straight up, rocket ship. It's a rocket ship. We need to change the way we've been prosecuting. We need to change and reform our entire criminal system. That is my entire platform, that is my entire message. And the reason is twofold. Yes, there's the social aspect that will address intergenerational poverty and all those types of issues, and we'll get to that. But then there's the cost too. It's just economically unsustainable. Every state is dealing with this. The good news, some states are quickly and rapidly reacting to it. Blessedly, Washington's one of them. Washington did a study in 2015. It concluded that by 2021, it needs $291 million just to get from 17, 1,705 beds to 1,811 beds roughly. By 2032, they're going to need another 380 million if we stay on that course. The U.S. Congress has also been studying this. The Department of Justice has been studying this. This has been studied for a while now. And the beautiful thing is they agree with scientists, and Dr. Diamond, who's one of them, that prevention can happen, even with crime, as long as you don't treat it as an art, and you treat it as a science. So what we've learned is certain programs like gun buyback programs, things like that, neighborhood watches, they don't work at all. But what we have learned is with science-based programs, like for infants, if there's a home with domestic violence and nurses go to that home once a week, domestic violence drops 92%. For preschoolers, classes with weekly home visits by preschool teachers. For delinquent risk youth, family therapy and parent training works. These are all things that will prevent crime. Now, is that directly related to the prosecutor's office? No. But by diverting taxpayer money from juvenile justice, incarceration, prisons, and jails, and building more in those, and putting them into schools and prevention programs up front, and having a prosecutor that knows how to partner up and cooperate with all these agencies so we can get it done, in the long run, we'll have a better community and you will save money. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Branden Platter. I'm your county prosecutor. I became a prosecutor for no other reason than to help people. I was raised to believe that if people need help, you help them. I, like many of us, have seen a lot of people victimized in our lives, and I wanted to be one of those people that looked at these people, looked at these victims, people in this community that I live amongst, and say, I'll help you. I'll be your voice. I'll stand up for you. I wanted to be able to look at kids who have gone through some of the worst things that you can possibly imagine and tell them, I will tell your story. I will do what I can to get you justice. That's the reason I became a prosecutor, to help people, to help victims, to stand with them and get them justice. My focuses are victim rights, public safety, and accountability. I've been in the office for about 5 years, a little over 5 years. I've been the incumbent prosecutor for the last year. Before that, I was the chief criminal deputy prosecutor. I started in the office as a entry-level district court prosecutor. I worked my way up. I have experience in basically every type of crime that comes through the office. I've done trials in everything from DUIs to violent assaults, child sex cases, and right now we have, for some reason, a lot of homicide cases going on. So I feel like I have a well-balanced experience sort of across the board. I have what I believe is a well-balanced sense of justice as well. Some people belong in prison. Some people need treatment. The reality is most people are somewhere in the middle. And our job is to find that balance, to find justice and to do justice on a daily basis. Now, one of the key aspects of treatment and preventing recidivism is accountability. Anybody who has been through any sort of treatment program or knows about treatment programs knows you cannot rehabilitate somebody without accountability. Now, I know that at least Mr. Noma has accused my office of judging success based on conviction statistics, but we don't keep conviction statistics. Our job is not to convict, it is to do justice. I view success on an individual basis. One victim helped is a success. One addict treated is a success. One child molester in prison is a success. And my goal is to achieve success on every single case. There's a lot more to say. I'm familiar with the budget. I'm 100% transparent, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Okay, let's start. Branden, maybe you can just keep the microphone. We'll start with you.
I think I know by now.
Here's one. Recognizing that no gun control initiative will be perfect and have everyone's support, do you feel that the current initiative on our ballot this November is a good place to start?
Not really. I mean, I think that's a perfect statement. No gun-related legislation is ever going to be perfect. There are aspects of this bill that I think are beneficial. There are aspects of the bill that I don't agree with and I don't like. I'm for the Second Amendment. I have guns. I like shooting my guns. There are many aspects of this bill that frankly, I honestly believe are unconstitutional. That's the problem with legislation, is these things are drafted in a way that you can't get just what you want and not the stuff that you don't want. And I think that's a problem with the legislature, frankly. But no, I don't really think that this bill in particular is a good place to start, because I think the regulations are actually too heavy. There are some benefits to it, but I think, frankly, this one needs to be scrapped and gone back to the drawing board.
I actually agree with a lot of what Mr. Platter just said. In my reading of the bill, my biggest problem with the bill specifically, and I've talked to some friends about this, we've bounced it back and forth. Yes, I believe in the Second Amendment, but I believe in all the Bill of Rights, and more so for all of you and myself and my family. My favorite one actually is the Fourth. I don't like search and seizure without a warrant. I don't like search and seizure without probable cause. I don't like being bothered unless there's a reason for a law enforcement or an officer to bother me. And the way that law is written, the way I read it, a law enforcement officer could use that law as a pretext to get in your home. And I'd rather, since their offices are now in their cars, if they really want to search to check if I've got everything stored properly, or if I have, I'm on the list properly and everything's registered, I'd rather they go in their car for 30 minutes or 2 hours if they're not writing warrants often and it takes them longer, and get your warrant. I can't move my house, so it's not going anywhere. There's no rush. And if an officer wanted to use it as another way to get into your home, I think they could. The door is open there. I think the legislature should be more clear and say, look, if you're on a gun registry, you can't just knock on someone's door if you want to go in there. You can't just, if you think they also have cocaine, but you can't get that evidence, you can't use this as a reason to go in there to go see the cocaine. So the Fourth Amendment, the individual's right of privacy, your liberty in your home, it's sanctified.
Arian, here's one that maybe you could start on. You've talked about this a little bit, but maybe you have some further thoughts or something more specific to add. What would you do to reduce youth incarceration in our county, given that no other county in our state has as high a rate of youth incarceration as our county does?
And I think also it's the highest rate of Native incarcerated youth as well. So the good news is, the state studied this. SB 6550 passed. It's great. And it's great to hear my opponent along this trail advancing and evolving as he starts to learn more about discretion and alternative means to incarceration. What we need to do, like I said, is evidence-based programs. SB 6550 is going to encourage all prosecutors from here on out, starts July 2019, from here on out, even a kid that's charged with a felony, we're encouraged to find alternative means to incarceration. Why? Because the Washington Center for Court Research's study in 2016 learned that kids that are incarcerated have a much, much higher recidivism rate. And the reason I talk about metrics is because recidivism is something we need to be dealing with. 67% nationwide go back. With kids, it's even higher. And they go to the adult system afterwards. And for that matter, there's data now that the welfare system preps kids for juvenile justice, which preps them for adult. We're creating criminals. We figured it out. We're creating criminals. We need to stop. Evidence-based programs, we need more prevention. We need to bolster re-entry for these kids and adults when they're done with it. It's great when you get a rapist in prison. That is awesome. Rapists should be in prison. But they're coming home eventually, and we don't want them to continue to be rapists, correct? So we need to focus on re-entry and help these people get jobs, help these people get purpose in life. That's the role of the prosecutor. Provide fair trials and administer justice to all, not just one portion of the community, all of it. The defendant is part of the community, like it or not. And they can be fixed. Most people just can't get right. They can be fixed.
So I'm actually fairly aware of the numbers pertaining to our juvenile incarceration. And here's sort of an interesting fact. They're a little bit skewed based on the number of juvenile offenders that have been charged as adults. We had 2 juveniles a couple of years ago that people may remember that murdered somebody. While they're juveniles, they're required to be held in the juvenile detention facility. Those are counted as juvenile detention days for these numbers, when the reality is they're charged in adult court with murder. So these numbers are skewed a little bit. I'm not saying we don't have a high number of juvenile crimes. We do, frankly. But we also have a proportionally very high number of violent juvenile offenders, or juvenile offenders who commit sex offenses that are actually adult charged crimes. So it's not as simple as these are just juveniles committing crimes and we're holding them. Most of the juveniles are released. They don't actually face a lot of time. As far as re-entry, the prosecutor has zero authority when it comes to re-entry. That's Department of Corrections. That's juvenile probation. That's not within our authority to do. Now, there are programs within our system that work on probation and getting treatment to these juveniles to try to prevent recidivism and try to prevent them from coming back into the system. These are all things that have been in place for years that we use on a daily basis. Thank you.
Arian, you raised the ping pong paddle for the first time tonight, so you'd like to rebut something that you've heard?
Traditionally, prosecutors may not work on re-entry. 2013 Department of Justice studied, federally studied. Need to. Have to begin. Whether you vote for me now, it's coming. Reform's coming. The studies have been done, the data's been done. It's coming. Prosecutors' offices, my office will start to do this. We will start to work with the community and try to partner up with people to try to work on re-entry efforts. I'm also going to create a prosecutorial integrity unit. There won't be appeals that goes through the court, but we will, every 10 years, if a defendant writes in and says they were cheated somehow and there's something wrong with their case, we'll look at it first. Any conviction should be able to stand the test of time. So I don't have a problem reviewing anyone's case over and over again, because I know my team's going to do it right and the conviction will stand.
Keep the mic, and since we're almost out of time, would you respond, please, to the question about what you may have learned during the campaign that's particularly significant?
I'm the first one in my family to go to college. I was born in Columbia City, Seattle, Washington. Didn't exactly, or at least I didn't feel like I grew up in poverty, but absolutely poverty lived right next door to both and across the street. Poverty was all around. She was always there. And as I moved throughout my life to Maryland and DC and all these other places, teaching school, prosecuting, defending, practicing civil law, I've gotten to see intergenerational poverty, not just in my local community, not just here, not all over the nation. And the beautiful thing that I learned is other people are aware of it and we're trying to fix it. And we're starting to realize I'm not the only one that has felt like poverty itself forces some people down the wrong path. There's scientists that are now agreeing with me, and it feels really good. It's very refreshing to learn that.
Branden.
The thing that I think I've noticed most recently is I guess the degree of misinformation there is out there about what happens in our office and really what the role of our office and the legal authority of our office actually is. And I'll give you an example that happened to me today. I was asked by somebody what my stance on immigration is. I said, I have zero authority when it comes to immigration. That's federal, those are federal laws, those are not within my authority to deal with. And it's unethical to consider immigration status and how we deal with cases. The response that I got was, sorry, but no. You took an oath to uphold the federal Constitution, and you just lost my support because you will not uphold and enforce immigration laws. So it's this misinformation about what our job actually is, what happens in the office, the limits of our authority. We cannot exceed our limits. And frankly, this is misinformation that, from what I'm hearing, Mr. Noma has as well. So perhaps that's a failure of our office to get that information out there and educate the public. But I think that's something that I need to work on. Thanks.
Well, we are about at 8:15 or a little bit after, and that was the agreed upon concluding time for our forum. So let's thank not only our candidates who have been on the stage most recently, but all the candidates. And let's thank ourselves for taking the time to come tonight and to become better informed. And let's look ahead and thank each other for voting and for encouraging everyone we know to cast a ballot in November. So thank you all for being here tonight.
So just because you have it, try to mail it a little early, because there's a lot of ballots that did not get counted in the primary because you put it in your mailbox out at your street and it did not get that post date that day. So please keep that in mind as you vote.
Good point. Thank you very much.